We're going to read the stages of a sacred contract. All growth occurs in stages. The spiritual development is no exception. Yet sometimes we are not even aware that we have passed from one stage to the next until sometime afterward. One of the leading mystics in the West today, Ram Dass, was born into a wealthy family and was already pursuing a successful career as a Harvard professor and research psychologist when his life suddenly changed. While at Harvard in the early 1960s, Richard Alpert, as Ram Dass was known then, became interested in human consciousness and together with Timothy Leary conducted intensive research with LSD, psilocybin, and other psychedelic drugs in a circle that included Aldous Huxley and Allen Ginsberg. The psychedelic experiences completely upended Alpert's rationalistic world and introduced him to realms of consciousness outside anything he had learned about in his studies and research in psychology. After Alpert and Leary were dismissed from Harvard because of the controversial nature of their work, Alpert continued his research with private foundation for 4 more years. Stop! Although the mind-expanding drugs had transformed him, he was also concerned about the transient nature of his highs, in quotations. No matter how marvelous they were, he always came down. Like Leary and Ginsberg, Alpert in 1967 decided to travel to India in search of new experiences. A fellow American seeker, whom he met there, introduced Alpert to a spiritual master named Neem Karoli Baba. The holy man instructed him in yoga and meditation and gave him the inspirational name Baba Ram Dass, or servant of God. Alpert had finally found a high he didn't have to come down from. Returning to the United States as Baba Ram Dass, he lectured widely, wrote several influential books about the spiritual path, including Be Here Now, and developed the Prison Ashram Project, designed to help inmates grow spiritually, and later the Living Dying Project, which helped the terminally ill to experience mindfulness, insight, and peace as they died. There are 3 stages to the journey I have been on, Ram Dass wrote after returning from India. The first, the social science stage, the second, the psychedelic stage, and the third, the yogi state. They each contributed to the next, he said, like the unfolding of a lotus flower. Yet, looking back, he realized that many of the experiences that made little sense to me at the time they occurred were prerequisites for what was later to come. But the stages of Ram Dass's journey were not finished. Now in his 60s, after he finished writing a new book about conscious aging, his publisher returned the manuscript, feeling it lacked conviction. While he was trying to figure out how to improve it, Ram Dass had a stroke that left him paralyzed, yet fully conscious. For the first time in his life, this eloquent teacher and mystic, who had sometimes been accused of arrogance, found himself totally dependent for his survival on the help of close friends and medical professionals. After years of struggling to heal, Ram Dass did continue teaching, and having experienced some of the challenges of aging, he was able to bring profound insights to his book on aging entitled Still Here, which was published to great appreciation. The stages of Ram Dass's spiritual unfoldment could hardly have been clear to him at the time. They were happening. Before he suffered his stroke, he probably had little sense that the further growth and life challenges were necessary for him. Each stage made perfect sense, the lotus flower unfolding, but only in retrospect. Many other mystics, including Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, also went through multiple stages of awakening or enlightenment. Saint Teresa likened their progression to walking through the rooms of a mansion, and Saint John to ascending a mountain. Based on the experiences of these and other mystics from different spiritual traditions, the scholar Evelyn Underhill, in her classic book, Mysticism, distilled the Enlightenment process into 5 stages. Stop. Stop. Fat boy, chill out. She called them the stages of awakening, purification, illumination, the dark night of the soul, and divine union. In the unfolding of the sacred contracts of the great spiritual masters, we can see a similar progression. These mystical stages represent an archetypal model of progression to soul clarity, in quotations. That is, the capacity to recognize that the material contents and relationships of our physical world are here only as props or parts of our service to our contract. The stages by which the spiritual masters become aware of the nature of their contracts are the same as the 5 stages through which we must go. Indeed, the same resistance to what we might label the divine call, in quotations, and the prophets felt is evident in our own resistance to the inner voice of intuition. The difference is mainly one of degree. You may want to pause and reflect for a time here on any promptings or coincidences or intuitions that you've had over the years. Write them in your journal or notebook. Note whether they came to you in a dream, through a comment, warning, or compliment from a loved one or stranger, through the lyrics of a song, or feeling you got from music or nature, or through something you experienced or learned through work or a pastime. How did you react to these inklings at first? Did you welcome or ignore them or even suppress them? Did you act on them? What happened afterward? The way you receive intuition or callings or guidance will help you determine the kinds of archetypal forces that are at work in your life and will ultimately help you discern your sacred contract. Abraham's awakening to the nature of his contract follows the 5 stages outlined below. As with anything we learn, the stages generally overlap and continue to unfold throughout our life as we grow or develop a skill or insight. The stages are not strictly linear progression, but rather a continuous process of growth and unfoldment. And you might go through a number of times in your life as you encounter new challenges or circumstances. So I'm going to read stage 1, contract. A moment of correction occurs between you and the divine. According to the biblical account in Genesis, 7 direct encounters occurred between Yahweh and Abraham. The first encounter, we're told, that the Lord spoke to Abraham, but in subsequent directives, the Lord appeared, in quotations, several times to him, and the word of the Lord came unto Abraham in a vision. Jesus, while being baptized by John in the river Jordan, experienced enlightenment as heaven was opened and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on him. For the Prophet Muhammad, the connection came while he was meditating in a cave not far from Mecca, and the angel Jibril, the Arabic name for Gabriel, delivered his first revelation from Allah. The Buddha did not believe in a supreme being, although he did accept the presence of many lesser gods from the Hindu pantheon. Yet during his enlightenment, as he sat in prolonged meditation under the Bodhi tree, he connected with a level of universal knowledge and wisdom that rendered him omniscient. We will be introduced to the divine through ordinary and extraordinary experiences, even if spiritual messengers are not involved. For instance, the divine influence is evidence when a cluster of disasters occurs in a remarkably short period of time and reroutes your life. Aster means from the stars, indicating a long-held belief that bad things happen for reasons known by the heavens, or an unforeseen opportunity might present itself. The divine might also be revealed through dreams, extraordinary coincidences, a transcendent experience of the natural world, or during prayer or meditation. The hallmark of the divine experience, regardless of what form it takes, is that it gets your attention and leads you to think something out of the ordinary might be happening to you. Divine encounters will be ongoing as opposed to a one-time phenomena. That does not mean that disasters will be continuous, but it does mean that once you make a conscious connection with divine energy, that presence is forever within you, within your awareness and life. Your encounters may not be as dramatic or clear-cut as Abraham's, but their outcome is generally irreversible. Take a few moments to examine your life for turning points and represent some departure from the tribal values in which you were raised. Perhaps you encountered an inspirational figure or mentor, either in person or through reading or through arts. Ask yourself how that individual, book, or aesthetic experience entered your life, and draw a line from that point to where you are today. Then add other points along the lines where other individuals or experiences helped to reinforce these initial messages. For Ram Dass, the moment of contract occurred on his first trip to India, when he was still known as Richard Alpert. One night during his travels, Ram Dass related in Be Here Now, he had a vision of his mother, who had died the year before of a spleen ailment, in which she urged him not to turn back on his search for inner liberation. Not long after that vision, he was standing out under the stars, thinking about his mother, and felt her presence guiding him. The next day, he was taken to meet a man who would become his guru, whom he then called simply Maharaji. The first thing Maharaji asked was whether Alpert would give him the expensive Land Rover that he had driven there and that belonged to a friend of Alpert's, a request he quickly declined. Some time later, Maharaji took Alpert aside and said to him, "You were out under the stars last night. You were thinking about your mother." Maharaji somehow knew that Alpert's mother had died the previous year. Stop. She got very big in the stomach before she died, the guru said. Spleen. She died of spleen. The first thing that happened Alpert later wrote of that moment, was that my mind raced faster and faster to try to get leverage, to get a hold of what he had just done. I went through every super CIA paranoia I've ever had. Who is he? Who does he represent? Where's the button he pushes where the file appears? And why have they brought me here? None of it would gel. It was just too impossible that it could have happened this way. The guy I was with didn't know all that stuff, and I was a tourist in a car, and the whole thing was just too far out. He tried to relate the experience to those he had with psychedelic drugs, but it didn't fit that pattern, and instead his mind continued to speed up. I felt like I felt like what happens when a computer is fed an insoluble problem. The bell rings and the red light goes on and the machine stops. And my mind just gave up. It burned out its circuitry. Its zeal to have an explanation. I needed something to get closure at the rational level, and there wasn't anything. There just wasn't a place I could hide in my head about this. At the same moment, I felt this extremely violent pain in my chest and a tremendous wrenching feeling, and I started to cry. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I wasn't happy, and I wasn't sad. It was not that kind of crying. The only thing I could say was that it felt like I was home, like the journey was over, like I had finished. At that point, Albert was willing to offer Maharaji the Land Rover or anything else he wanted. Although the guru simply took him on as a disciple for no fee. Through the medium of an Indian holy man, this American academic had made contact with divine power, and his life was irrevocably changed in a way that LSD and psilocybin could have never accomplished. That is stage 1 of the contracts. Oh, let's read an archetype. Oh. Okay. Child. Puella Eternis, eternal boy girl. Positive aspects of this archetype manifest as a determination to remain eternally young in body, mind, and spirit. People who maintain that age will never stop them from enjoying life and relying on the positive energy of this archetype to supply that healthy attitude. The shadow eternal child often manifests as an inability to grow up and embrace the responsible life of an adult. Like Peter Pan, he resists ending a cycle of life in which he is free to live outside the boundaries of conventional adulthood. The shadow puella eternis can manifest in women as extreme dependency on those who take charge of their physical security. A consistent inability to be relied on and the inability to accept the aging process are also markers of this archetype. Although few people delight in the ending of their youth, the eternal child is sometimes left floundering and ungrounded between the stages of life because he has not laid a foundation for functioning adulthood. Films. Tom Hanks in Big, Pee Wee Herman and Pee Wee's Big Adventure, Carol Baker and the Baby Doll, Thomas Hulsey in Dominic Eugene and Mozart in Amadeus. Fairy tale, Peter Pan. Religion, myth, Cupid, boy god of Roman myth said to have been born from a silver egg. Harpa Kuriti, Horus the child. Harpocrates, Greek deity of silence and secrecy, represented as a naked boy sucking his finger.